Mushrooms are my thing. I mean, they enlightened me, they straightened me out, they love me. But the way to do mushrooms is the very first move, if you're interested in mushrooms, is, for God's sake, buy a scale. Buy a scale. I mean, you wouldn't think that this would be considered such an exotic suggestion to people who are going to put their bodies and minds on the line, because people don't take enough. People do not take enough mushrooms. They take pissant amounts, and then they claim that they're initiates. You must take a measured 5 dried grams on an empty stomach. Measured. And when you see what that is, you'll realize that, you weren't even camped in the atrium. You were camped in the driveway.
Welcome back to another episode of Trip Report. That was the late and great Terence McKenna. If you're unfamiliar, he was essentially the psychedelic philosopher of the 70s, 80s, all the way up until he passed. And that first 6 months that I was researching psilocybin before having my first encounter, I listened to a lot of what he had to say because it was just truly fascinating stuff. And that was an excerpt that had come up and really spoke to me, this heroic dose that he speaks of, and, saying that most people are taking these pissant small amounts, and I've kind of alluded to it in previous podcasts, but I think when you see the profound changes in people from psychedelic experiences, it really only happens on the higher doses. On the lower doses, it can be a little more recreational or just kind of sliding a foot in the door. You stay in control. It's nice and comfortable. But it's really only when you are forced to surrender and let go that you have these profound life-changing experiences. And so today's podcast is about my first quote-unquote heroic dose, and that being 5 dried grams of mushrooms. So up until this point, like I said, most of my doses were 3.5 grams. That was kind of the sweet spot that I dropped in on. And I do feel like I purged a lot of trauma and had a lot of downloads and breakthroughs and everything else on the 3.5. But prior to this 5 gram experience, my only higher dose was that 4 gram that I had on the previous solo cast on my birthday. And again, that was a pretty profound experience, but I think I still had a lot of nerves surrounding the 5 gram experience. Just the term heroic dose had me on the fence about experiencing it. And since then, mind you, this is maybe 8 years ago. I don't know. This is a while back. And nowadays, the new heroic dose, the threshold is bumped up to people are talking 10 grams, 20 grams, 30 grams. Kalindi Iyi being a very interesting example of, he was kind of the one that even opened my mind to the possibility that people take these unbelievably high doses of mushrooms. And I still haven't been there. I haven't done that. But 5 grams was life-changing for me. And I would say to this day, still arguably one of the most unbelievable psychedelic experiences I've ever had. Now, I do contract work, so it's not uncommon for me to be laid off for 6 months at a time until the next contract picks up. And I was between jobs at the time, and just kind of enjoying life, taking a break, that sort of thing. And a friend of mine reached out, and I'll keep him anonymous through all of this. I'm hoping that he wants to come in at some point and explain his side of the story, because I think his was pretty profound as well. But he had reached out and he said, "Hey man, any chance you're looking to go on a journey tomorrow? I have some free time and I need it. I could use the good reset." So I thought to myself, I guess there's no reason not to, because it's been a while and I got nothing going on. Let's see how this goes. And so this friend of mine, he had encountered all of these plant medicines, I guess just psychedelics in general, in his earlier years in life. So through high school and all that, he had dabbled a little bit. And he had told me previously, I guess one thing I should say is that, most of my circle back in this day were people who were still in the military or, were veterans. And so I couldn't talk to a lot of people about these things or really resonate with others, because so many of my inner circle didn't have these experiences and weren't seeking the experiences anyway. So the few people that I did know, this guy being one of them, it was good to be able to open up and discuss these things. And so he had told me, oh, I've done several hits of acid in the past. I've done 7 grams of mushrooms in the past. And it sounded like he was pretty, knowledgeable of what was going on. And so I thought to myself, okay, if I'm going to go through this experience with somebody who has a lot of experience with this, maybe this is the time that I do the 5 grams. I feel like it'd be no better experience to go through this, because I was hesitant to do it solo, even though the majority of my 3.5 and 4 gram doses were solo. The 4 gram was with other people, but the majority of my 3.5 were solo. I was still, like I said, very nervous about titrating up to 5 grams, and I figured best to have somebody with some experience around in case something goes off the rails. Another fascinating thing about how this all went down was just a day or two prior. This was back, I was kind of dabbling with cultivation back then. And this was, I could probably look it up because it was not that long ago and it was pretty rare. It was that we had the 3 blood moons in a row. And that 3rd blood moon, again, this bizarre, number 3 coming up again. On that 3rd blood moon, I had thought that the current setup that I had, it was past its 3rd flush. I figured the mushrooms were done. It was over with. And the night of that 3rd blood moon, there were a couple little pins growing on the cake. But if anybody, for people who haven't cultivated mushrooms before, it's pretty fascinating how quickly these things can grow. So it just looked like a bunch of little tiny ones the night of the blood moon. And then whenever I woke up the next morning, there was like a little forest that had popped up overnight. Just unbelievably quick growth. And they were all attached together. And so I'd been flirting with this 5 gram idea for a while and pulled them, dehydrated them. And when they were dehydrated and I threw them on the scale, it was 5.0 grams on the dot. So just mind blowing. It was like, okay, I guess this was meant to be. Then my buddy reaches out to me the day after. So I'm like, okay, this is what it is. This is what we're going to do. So we agree that he's going to come over. I think it was a Friday night. I put them in the tea, got everything ready, put it in the fridge, and was waiting for him to show up. And when he got there, he had asked, what are you going with? And I explained, hey, since you're going to be here, I think it's time that I'm going to have the courage to go ahead and send this 5. We'll see how it goes. And he was like, yeah, cool. And I said, how much do you want to do? And he said, let's do 5. Sounds good. I was like, all right, sounds good, man. So weighed out his 5, was getting it prepped, in the tea and everything. And when I opened the refrigerator and pulled out the mason jar that I had mine in, it had turned a dark blue. And he'd said, well, what did you mix yours with? Is that, juice or Kool-Aid or something like that? And I was like, nope, that's the same green tea that yours just went into. And we looked at each other kind of confused because that was the first time I'd ever seen the tea turn blue like that. But since then, there have really only been 2 other experiences that I watched the water actually turn blue. And I don't know that that's a higher psilocybin content or why only sometimes it turns blue, because whether it's been a hot tea or a cold extraction, it's pretty rare that I see it go a dark, dark blue like that. I'm talking navy blue. So I am even more nervous that this thing changed color on me, but we weigh his out, we both send it, and then we head in the backyard and we're just kind of sitting there waiting for it to kick in. Mind you, previously, I could kind of count on a 30 to 45 minute come up time. That was typically about how long it took until I started yawning and then the visuals themselves would start to kick in. But we were sitting back there and he had just gotten back from a business trip and was explaining how everything went. And within 5 minutes, maybe, the tree that was next to me, which is a butterfly tree, bright yellow flowers on it, it looked like it had come to life and it looked like it was kind of like reaching for me. And I was like, are you feeling anything? And he was like, I think so. And so I like kind of sat back and it came on heavy and it came on fast. And I think to myself, okay, at least I do have somebody else here because this is so much faster than it normally is. And this is coming on so much stronger than it normally does. Like at least there's somebody that can hopefully ground me if I need it. And then I look at him and he is white knuckle squeezing the chair that he's sitting in and saying, it's too strong. This is too strong. This is too strong. And so I'm like, oh no, okay, maybe this isn't the grounding person that I need going through this. And that kind of gave me a new outlook on why you should have a sober trip sitter there, not somebody else taking as high of a dose as you are. So at that point, I look up in the sky and it was a full-ish moon because like I said, it was the blood moon a few days before, so it had a few days to wane. And when my eyes met the moon, they forced crossed. And you know how uncomfortable it is to like force your eyes cross, like to look at the center of your nose. And I had that painful feeling. So I closed my eyes to try to undo that forced crossed thing. And the second my eyes closed, there was another world there of the most bright, vibrant, crazy colors I had seen to date. And typically with previous experiences, I would close my eyes, it would go black, and then slowly all of the colors and visions and everything would fade back in. And this was not the case. It was the second that my eyes closed, it was there. And I don't think I was ready for it yet. So I was like trying to fight it, essentially, keeping my eyes open, look back up at the moon, eyes crossed again. And now I'm kind of freaking out because up until this point, I had always had full control of my body. Like if I went deep into one of these experiences and the visuals, I could snap myself out of it if I needed to. But this was a point where I was now losing bodily function, which scared me. So I fought it, opened my eyes again, and I'm looking at him, and he doesn't look like he's having that great of a time either. And then so my eyelids start getting really heavy, as if they're like trying to force themselves closed anyway. And I'm fighting to keep them open. And for anybody out there that was going through school through like the 80s, 90s, if you remember the background of the yearbook photos, the laser one, I'm forcing to keep my eyes open. And now we get to a point where the visuals are starting to come through to open eye. It's like, okay, you're not going to shut your eyes, so you're getting visuals regardless. So in the distance, I could see some evergreenish trees but you know, silhouettes of them because it's dark and it's a full moon. And I see in the night sky, 3 lines run to the left that are bright pink, and then like 4 lines come down from top to bottom that are bright purple. And it looked exactly like that laser background from the elementary school photos. So I'm like, well, this isn't good, because even with eyes open, I'm seeing some crazy colorful stuff come through. And then I see the trees kind of come out, up, around, and look like teeth coming back down and shut down. And then with eyes open, it went black. So I was like, well, now I'm blind. This isn't good. So close my eyes to try to reset it. As soon as I close my eyes, again, deep in this bizarre visual, super bright field of like next level things that I'd never seen before in the mushroom world. So it finally clicks with me. What it's telling you, you need to have your eyes closed. Like you keep trying to fight this and keep your eyes open, but that's not what you need to see right now. What's going to unravel here is an eyes closed situation, or it's going to come through to your eyes being open. So again, eyes are still super heavy, eyelids. And I say to him, look, man, I can't be out here. Like, I'm sorry to leave you on your own, but you know, I'm going to take my phone in. I'll have my headphones in. So I was like, I'll be in the back room. There's another spare bedroom. Feel free to go in there, lay down, do whatever you got to do to get comfortable, but either come knock on the door and get me, or, you know, just send me a text. Cause like I'll hear the notification come through and then I'll be able to respond, not taking into account that my phone was just a complete kaleidoscope and it's almost impossible to respond to a text anyway. So he says, yeah, cool. You do you. I think I'm going to smoke some herbs, see if that helps me. We'll see where it goes. And I said, all right, cool. So I got up, walked into the bedroom, and finally, I guess that the best I can say is like, that was my surrender. I finally laid down and was like, let's just go in. Like, it's trying to make me close my eyes. Let's see where this thing goes. It is what it is. And so I shut the eyes, and the visuals, you know, I've seen color before of all different shades and whatever, but this brought in like levels of like chrome is the best way for me to describe it. It looked like metal, but like shiny metal, and reflection of colors and all that. And what it looked like was kind of like the Mortal Kombat dragon, sort of like that, but it was the full length, like the whole body of the dragon. And it was several of them layered on top of each other, kind of running back and forth through each other. So it was like these chrome dragons with a super orangish, yellowish, bright background behind them, like as bright as the sun coming through. And they're going back and forth. And then in the center of a lot of these visions were what looks kind of like a vertical eyeball and just like the most brilliant light I've ever seen. And it was like every vision as it changed and went to a new one, into a new one, into a new one. In the middle was this weird vertical eyeball of like just the brightest, whitest light I've ever seen. And it was starting to come like bigger, like it was getting closer to me, closer to me, closer to me. So I'm, looking at it, and then I hear a text come through, and I am able to look at it, and he says, "Hey man, this is too much. I just need to get home. Like, I called an Uber. It is what it is. Like, best of luck." So I was like, "Oh, well, let me go make sure this dude's all right." So I get up and walk out, and I see him looking confused near the front door. And he says, "Yeah, the Uber's here." I was like, "Well, just let me know when you get home. Let me know that you're safe, because this is really sketchy that you're on a really high dose of mushrooms jumping in an Uber right now." I mean, I would love to have seen what the conversation between him and the Uber driver was. But he gets in the car, takes off. So I lock the door, and I'm like, okay, back to surrender. I go back in and lay down, and then got another text, and he said, "Hey, I forgot my keys." And I'm like, okay. So I go open the door, let him back in, and he walks in, and he's just looking around super confused, and he says, "I forgot my keys." And then I was like, "You mean the keys that are in your hand?" And he's holding a stack of keys, and he looks at them and looks at me confused and was like, "My other keys." And I was like, "What other keys could you possibly have?" And then I see him walk over to one of the drawers in the kitchen that has the cutlery in it, forks, knives, spoons, opens that drawer and pulls out another set of keys. So I'm super confused and start laughing. Like, what? Why does this guy have multiple sets of keys? Mind you, I also am now thinking of the fact that this guy on a ton of mushrooms had to turn the Uber driver around to come back and get keys. But he, beelines to the door, goes back out, and I said, "Yeah, just call me when you get back so I know you're safe." He says, "Okay," and takes off. So now I have a little bit of nerves because this guy is come over to do this with me and is now on his own out in the streets trying to make his way home via a stranger. But it was so heavy that it was just like, I need to get back into this. So go in, lay down, back into the visuals, still have that bizarre vertical eye light thing in the middle. And I just continue to travel, just going deeper and deeper and deeper. And like I said, it was getting bigger and bigger. And then what it showed me was all these visuals that I've kind of been looking at were some kind of curtain. There was a curtain, but there was something on the other side. And that weird white light was a portal to whatever the other side was. So I thought, okay. And I didn't have that feeling of like being trapped with a tether and stuck here, any of that kind of thing. So I just said, okay, well, let's go into it. And I went into that vertical eye. And when I went into the super bright white light, it then turned into darkness. So it went all dark. And as far as I remember, there was no more sound. Like, even though I had the music playing in my headphones, it was like it drowned out. It was gone. What was left was, in the blackness, a kind of orb of sorts. It was a darker orange, almost translucent, and just sitting there pulsing. And I think I had like the inquiry in my brain, what is this? And it said, I am all. And so it was a discussion, but just via no words used. It was just like, I thought a question, I got an answer. I thought a question, I got an answer. And what it told me was it was the source, it was the creator, it was creation, and that this is what humanity makes the mistake of saying is this bearded man in the clouds, or the God, or all of the other different words or terms that we have for God, and the way that we draw pictures and make up what this is. Really what it is just the source energy that creates all things. And so it said, well, you made it. What questions do you have for me? And so I just started firing off all the random questions. What's the meaning of life? What is religion? Going through it. And it was like with every single thing, I just got back the most clear, concise answer. And it was like, oh, I understand all of this. This all makes sense. Now, the frustrating part is it doesn't come back with you. It's like you get it, the answers, and then you pretty much have amnesia when you come back out. I think what I got from religion was basically what the creator was telling me, and it's also kind of a religious teaching, was that we are all God. Like, this thing has created all of us, and it's the same energy that runs all of us. So although we're slightly different, we're all still our own thing running the simulation, and we are the human version of God. So if you go from like the Catholic standpoint, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the Father is the creator of all. The Spirit is what he uses to enter into the body here on earth. And the Son, or if you want to refer to it as Jesus, is really just what all of us are. It's just his manifestation, or its manifestation of becoming more than just energy in a form, not even human form, in a form on earth. And it just made so much sense. And it was like, well, then what's the reason for all of these religions or the biblical texts and those sorts of things? And it was basically like, it's supposed to be a reminder to you that you are God. And I can see that, but I also think that a lot of organized religions, things were lost in translation or tweaked for their monetary profit. It's one of those things where I can respect a lot of the messages that are taught via the modern religions, but I think so much was lost in the time being. And we know that there are countless texts and scrolls and everything else buried below the Vatican that they don't want the world to see. So I think that that's where a lot of these religions came from, where somehow these plants connect you to the divine to let you know you are a divine being or the one, and you can get there. You don't need to pay. You don't need to weekly tide or monthly tide your income to some random guy that doesn't know what he's talking about. You can go visit God. And it completely changed my outlook on just religion in general, because, you know, being raised Catholic, and I love the term recovering Catholic, because that was, you're essentially brainwashed growing up, being scared of this fiery place called hell and told that if you don't act right, you're not going to get into this heaven. And I think it causes some trauma being brought up in that upbringing. So I kind of rebelled after I wasn't forced to go to church anymore with the parents, and kind of turned hard the wrong direction of saying I'm an atheist. I would identify as an atheist, saying that there is no God. And after a couple years went by before finding plant medicines, I had always said, okay, well, I can't prove there isn't a God, although in my mind, nobody can prove there is one, but I don't know. So, you know, I can't prove it. So therefore, it makes more sense to identify as agnostic rather than atheist. So for years, I would tell people I'm agnostic. I can't prove there is a God, but I can't prove there isn't, and I'm just living my life. After this experience, it was like, okay, there is clearly a God, a source, a creator, but I still don't identify with the modern religions or the organized religions, because it's clear to me that they're all there just to make money. And they're promoting some of the correct principles that religion, you know, should teach, or that we as human beings should respect. But it just seems like there's so many negative things associated with it that it's hard for me to join one of these, I don't know, essentially cults, if you were to ask me, but to each their own. So it's allowing me to just fire off these questions and go through, and I'm getting the answers immediately. And after, I don't know how long I was in there, it said, okay, cool. It seems like you're out of questions. And I was like, yeah. And it said, well, you know, I know part of the reason that you love being in here so much is that you love the music. You resonate with the music. And I was like, that's true. And it was like, well, are you ready to get back to it? I said, I sure am. And then the music started to come back into the headphones again, and super, you know, gnarly, like, you know, like I could feel the music. I was part of the music, that whole thing. And it came back in, and then I watched it just kind of fade back out, that orb. And I backed out behind the curtain again. And then all of the vibrant, bizarre visuals came right back in. So I was just kind of, you know, loving the music and taking a ride through the other side. And it was amazing. So as I was going through there, I couldn't even tell you timeline on how this all went down, because it came on so quickly. And I started to think, oh man, I really hope my buddy made it home. Just thinking like this could have went so far south. But I was like, so glad he reached out to me, because I don't know that I would have had the courage to take this 5-gram dive if he hadn't reached out. And I was like, you know, he is definitely a good friend, somebody I'm glad I met in life. And so I grabbed the phone, and by this point I could text. It was still a kaleidoscope, but I could get some stuff out there. And I think I sent just like a love you, man, or something like that. And, oh, I'm sorry. I got to back up. This was wrong. The first person that came into mind afterwards was Dan, the one who I did the very first episode with the UFOs. He had been out here a year prior, and we had a little backyard experience in the pool. And after the experience is over, he was like, that's it. I'm moving to California. I'm done with the East Coast. This is where I belong. And the message that came to me afterwards, I was like, man, I'm so glad. I'm glad Dan came out here. Like, it takes courage to give up on the life that you've, you know, become so accustomed to do what's best for you. And he and his wife committed and made it happen. And they were out here within a year. And so I was like, that's so awesome. I'm so glad they're here. So the first thing I did was send like a fist bump emoji to him. Now this gets interesting because the next day, like I said, this is 10 p.m., 11 p.m., maybe midnight. The next day, he calls me and it says, hey, I got to tell you, it's so weird when you sent me that fist bump emoji, because he said, I smoked some cannabis and I was doing my meditation. And as I was journeying through the portals on my meditation, I thought about you and was like, I'm so glad, I had that experience with Sean, and that it gave me the courage to make the move. And now we're here and we made this all happen. He said, while I was thinking that, your fist bump emoji came through. And I was like, that's no coincidence. That's so bizarre that we both linked in that other realm at the same time, making contact. So that kind of wrapped up. And then that's whenever I thought about my buddy and was thinking about it. I was so glad that he reached out and that I was able to, find the courage to do this, because if he hadn't, I don't know how long it would have taken for me to finally do this 5-gram experience. So I thought, hope he made it home all right. I need to reach out and make sure he's okay. And then my phone rings and it's him. And he said, hey man, yeah, sorry I didn't get to you sooner. Did make it home. It was just a wild ride. And there was a lot to unpack. This was super powerful. Even though I ended up leaving, thanks for making this all happen and hope everything's going well. And it was just like, yep, cool, still in it. Enjoy the rest of your night. I'll talk to you in the morning, that kind of thing. And we set our separate ways. So I kind of fell back into the trance again. And then I was just going through in my mind, like, all of the people that I'm so grateful to have in my life, friends, family, loved ones, like, and it just showed me, how awesome this life is, and like how grateful I am to be able to experience life in this body with these people around me. And I was just so grateful for everything. And like I said, it was just one person after another popping in my head. So then it started to wind down. Everything started to wear off. Music went back to its normal tones and came back to baseline. And one of the problems with these, because I probably texted like 30 people that night, love you, you're the best, so happy to have you in my life. And I'm not ashamed that I did it. It gives you that headspace of, you need to, the people that you love, like, tell them you love them. And maybe not at midnight or 1 a.m. because what I have found is a lot of people worry about you when you text love you 1 a.m. or if we look at East Coast time, 3 a.m., that message is coming through. So that can worry some people, but it's one of those things where maybe you should put your phone down till the following day. But that being said, like I said, I've never regretted those texts, because that's what I wanted to say at the time, was let these people know that I loved them, and I did. So it is what it is. So that wraps up. Next morning, wake up, I feel like $1 million. Feel like somebody hit the reset button, somebody defragmented the hard drive. It was, again, one of the most profound experiences, and then like one of the best resets that I had to date. And still to this date, probably the gnarliest visuals that I've ever had. Maybe on any substance, but definitely on psilocybin. Now, the most interesting thing about this to me, and why I'm hoping to get my buddy on to tell his side of the story, is because life catches up with you. I talked to him the next day. He said, yeah, everything went great. It was an interesting experience. It was what it was. And then I don't think we crossed paths for maybe 3 months. I just didn't see him, stuff going on. He had stuff going on. And then the next time that we went to meet up, I think we met up for like dinner or to grab a beer or something like that. And he had lost maybe 50 pounds. I almost didn't recognize him. And it was, as long as I'd known him, he wasn't a fat guy, but he was a little overweight. And to see him essentially shredded, I couldn't believe it. And I was like, yeah, man, you look amazing. And he briefly explained what had happened, but basically got the message that if you're going to be there for your family, you need to take your health seriously. And I guess that got him on cardio and cleaning the diet up. And yeah, it was mind blowing. And, like I said, it was probably 50 pounds. I'd be curious what he lost overall. That being said, is to this day, he has a 6-pack. You can see his abs. And so it's one of those things that it was a lasting change that he made, that this 5-gram experience gave him. And so that's where I stand by it, that the life-changing things happen at the higher doses. If you're doing 1 gram of mushrooms or 2 grams of mushrooms or microdosing, there's some benefit to it. I won't argue that. But I think if you're looking for a positive change that's going to stick, it's the higher doses. Now, like I said, this was by no means a bad trip, but there were some parts that were very difficult, especially the loss of like bodily control that made me quite nervous. But yeah, that I guess pretty much sums up what I wanted to put out there about the 5 gram experience. So up until this point, I had nothing but positive experiences with psilocybin. I had read all of the reports here and there and heard all the horror stories of people with bad trips. And I was just like, I don't know what is going on with people that they're having these issues, because, I unpacked a lot of the war stuff and all of that, and it was all still pretty beneficial or positive. There were some spots that went dark, but it was just part of the journey. It wasn't terrifying or anything like that. But that being said, I think my next solo cast is going to be my first bad trip, because I don't want to put it out there that these things are always beneficial and always give you breakthroughs and that it's all happy-go-lucky, enjoying music and all of that, because there is a very, very dark side to this. And some of the battles that I've had there were far more difficult than both Iraq tours, boot camp, and all the childhood trauma that I unpacked later combined. So that being said, this will probably be my final positive psilocybin trip for the time being, and then we'll go into the darkness in the next one, and then we'll bump into some other substances whenever I get to ayahuasca, maybe LSD. We'll talk some of the other side of things, but hope you enjoyed this one. This is one that I've been looking forward to sharing, because to this date, like I said, my 5 gram quote unquote hero dose was one of the most profound for me. Hope you enjoyed it. Catch you in the next one.